They fired her for being herself, a black CEO's painful exit. When she walked into that boardroom, the applause was deafening, but little did she know, some of those smiles were hiding knives. The day Ava Daniels was appointed CEO of Brightspark Solutions, the energy in the room was electric. Cameras flashed. Journalists crowded the hallway. Her mother sat in the front row, eyes filled with tears, watching her daughter break through a ceiling so many had only ever seen from below. For Ava, this wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Born and raised in the heart of Atlanta, Ava had known struggle. Her father passed when she was 7. Her mother worked 2 jobs, a nurse by day, cleaner by night, just to keep the lights on. Ava studied by candlelight sometimes, used second-hand laptops, and wore hand-me-downs that didn't always fit. But she never stopped dreaming. She graduated top of her class at Spelman. Then came Harvard Business School, where she wasn't just one of the few black students, but often the only black woman in the room. It didn't scare her. It sharpened her. She went on to climb the tech industry ladder faster than anyone expected, not because she was handed anything, but because she earned everything. With each position, she brought fresh thinking, integrity, and undeniable results. So when Brightspark Solutions, a billion-dollar tech firm specializing in AI, announced Ava as their new CEO, the world cheered. Twitter exploded. LinkedIn flooded with praise. Hashtags like #BlackGirlMagic and #CEOAva trended for days. Media outlets called it a historic moment for the tech industry. And young black girls around the world? They saw her as more than a leader, they saw her as proof. Proof that you could be smart, bold, beautiful, and black, and still sit at the head of the table. But while the world outside celebrated, inside the boardroom, a different story was brewing. Some executives clapped for her that day, not out of joy, but out of duty. Some shook her hand, already counting the days until she'd be gone. And others? They smiled, but only with their mouths. Their eyes told the truth. There were whispers in corners even before she signed her first official document. She's too young. She's too flashy. Does she even understand how to lead a company of this size? And worst of all, this diversity push has gone too far. What many didn't see, or refused to see, was that Ava was not a token. She wasn't there to fill a quota or play nice. She was there to lead. And she led with something most of her predecessors lacked: authenticity. From the beginning, Ava made it clear, she wouldn't change herself to fit into the mold of past CEOs. She wore her natural curls proudly in meetings filled with straight-laced executives. She spoke with passion, not in polished, rehearsed corporate jargon, but in real language that made people listen. She asked hard questions. She challenged outdated systems. She didn't just sit at the table, she reshaped it. And that kind of leadership? It threatened people. Because Ava didn't just challenge how the company worked, she challenged who the company worked for. Under her watch, she pushed Brightspark to invest in underserved communities. She launched mentorship programs for women and minorities in tech. She even introduced internal reforms to reduce bias in hiring algorithms, the very technology the company sold to clients worldwide. In less than a year, Ava had improved public trust, increased revenue, and built stronger internal culture. But in the shadows, resentment grew. Board members who once smiled in press photos now complained in private emails. They said she was too visible. They accused her of making everything about race. One even told a colleague, she doesn't know her place. That was the problem. Ava did know her place, and it was at the top. But to some, a confident, principled, and unapologetic black woman in power was just too much. So they waited. They scrutinized her every move. They twisted her words. They documented every moment she didn't act like a typical CEO. And all the while, Ava kept rising, unaware that behind the applause, knives were being sharpened. From day one, Ava Daniels walked into that office not just to make the company profitable, but to make it purposeful. She wasn't interested in just maintaining the old systems. She came to transform them. Her first move? A deep audit of the company's technology, particularly its AI. What she found was alarming: biased algorithms, outdated ethics protocols, and a complete lack of oversight in how data was handled. So she acted fast. She overhauled the company's AI development standards, implementing strict ethical guidelines to ensure fairness, privacy, and accountability. She formed an internal ethics board. Not just for PR, but with real power to influence product decisions. And she introduced mandatory training on AI bias and social responsibility for every engineer. Within weeks, people were calling her reforms radical. Within months, other CEOs were calling her for advice. But Ava wasn't done. She looked around the office and saw a problem almost every tech leader ignores. The people building the future didn't look like the future. So she changed that, too. She launched outreach programs to recruit from historically black colleges, community colleges, and women's engineering programs. She created internship pipelines for first-generation students. And she promoted voices from within, people who had been overlooked for years. For the first time in BrightSpark's history, diversity wasn't a buzzword, it was a strategy. The results? White heavy checkmark employee morale soared. White heavy checkmark customer trust improved. White heavy checkmark and revenue jumped by 32% in her first year. The highest growth the company had seen in over a decade. But numbers only told part of the story. What truly made Ava different was her presence. She didn't water herself down to fit in. She showed up fully herself, unapologetically. In a sea of gray suits and corporate masks, Ava stood out, and she embraced it. She wore bold colors. She kept her natural curls, even when image consultants politely suggested a more polished look. She started meetings by asking about people's families, checking in on mental health, and even sharing stories from her own life, the kind of vulnerability most CEOs are taught to avoid. But to Ava, leadership wasn't about pretending to be perfect. It was about being real. And her voice? It was passionate, powerful, and unfiltered. She didn't hide behind corporate jargon. She spoke from the heart, whether it was in front of a camera, a client, or a crowded boardroom. She wasn't cold. She wasn't rehearsed. She was honest. And for many people in the company, especially younger employees, women, and people of color, it was the first time they felt seen by leadership. But not everyone saw it that way. Some of the older board members began to squirm. They called her passionate tone too emotional. They said her candid feedback made others uncomfortable. In one private meeting, a senior executive even asked, "Can't she just be more like the last CEO?" Ironically, her predecessor, a white man, was known for shouting in meetings, slamming fists on the table, and publicly berating team leads. They called his outbursts strong leadership. But Ava's assertiveness? That was labeled as aggression. And that's how the Whisper campaign began. She's difficult. She's not professional enough. She makes everything about race. The whispers were small at first, easy to ignore. But over time, they grew louder. They crept into performance reviews. Into back-channel emails. Into those silent looks exchanged in board meetings when Ava dared to challenge outdated ideas. Still, she pressed forward. She believed her work would speak for itself. She believed excellence would protect her. She believed, like so many others do, that if you just do your job well enough, people would have no choice but to respect you. But what Ava didn't know, or maybe what she tried not to believe, was that for some people, her very existence was the problem. She was too bold. Too different. Too black. And for them, that was all the excuse they needed. It didn't take long before the whispers turned into something bigger. The tension started small, little things. Meetings Ava wasn't invited to. Projects reassigned without explanation. Her ideas, once celebrated, now met with polite nods and silent dismissal. But Ava was focused. She kept doing what she did best, leading with excellence. Until one Wednesday morning changed everything. She walked into what was scheduled as a routine leadership meeting, but the air in the room was heavy. Something was off. The chief legal officer, usually chatty, wouldn't make eye contact. The head of HR shifted nervously in her seat, fidgeting with her pen. The CTO, who'd once called Ava the best thing to happen to the company, sat stiffly, arms crossed, eyes down. Then came the moment. The chairman of the board cleared his throat and said calmly, "Ava, we've received some concerns about your leadership approach." Ava blinked. Concerns? He nodded. Anonymous complaints. Enough that we're obligated to launch an internal review. No one looked at her. No one spoke up. And just like that, the ground beneath her began to shift. She asked for specifics. But there were none. No formal complaints. No evidence. Just vague, slippery language. Unprofessional tone. Concerns about alignment with company culture. Some employees feel uncomfortable. It was all smoke. But no fire. Ava had a spotless record. Her performance reviews were outstanding. Employee retention under her leadership had improved significantly. Quarterly reports showed rising profits, happier clients, and a stronger company culture. She had never raised her voice. Never broken a rule. Never acted in any way that could justify such scrutiny. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because what they were really saying, without saying it, was this. She made them uncomfortable. Not because of misconduct. But because she didn't conform. Because she refused to shrink. Because she led with heart instead of ego. Because she spoke with clarity instead of coded language. Ava sat in that room, stunned, as her colleagues discussed the process of the review, legal protocols, timelines, HR interviews. No one asked for her side. No one defended her. The decision had already been made. The review wasn't an investigation. It was a warning shot. And Ava knew, deep down. This wasn't about leadership style. This was about eliminating a problem. And to them, she was the problem. Ava took time off. She traveled. She healed. Then she spoke out. She gave interviews. She told the world exactly what happened, not with bitterness, but with power and clarity. And the world listened. She launched her own startup, one that not only succeeded but made millions in its first year. She started a mentorship program for young Black professionals. She became more than a CEO, she became a movement. Her story became a mirror, exposing how corporate spaces often reward silence over authenticity. But Ava? She never stayed silent again. Sometimes the world isn't ready for your light, but that doesn't mean you should dim it. They fired Ava for being herself. But in doing so, they set her free to become even greater.